So let's look at Senex. The title, Senex, actually is Latin for old man, but traditionally Senex was associated with a kind of wise, kindly father figure, and so obviously this title is ironic because the figure who's speaking in this poem is far from a wise, kindly father figure, although he does feel a little like an old man. So what Betjeman does in this poem is he focuses on the feelings and behaviour of an old man who still has some stirrings of desire, and he communicates these feelings in quite a voyeuristic way. The narrator watches these young ladies and in many sense, I mean, you've got to decide really. Some people view this poem as rather shockingly perverted, and yet others might see it as harmlessly entertaining, and you need to make up your own minds about that. So let's have a close look at the verses. The first verse, there's a lot of repetition of the word flesh. Oh, would I could subdue the flesh, which sadly troubles me, and then perhaps could view the flesh, as though I never knew the flesh, and merry misery. So that repetition places emphasis on his obsession with these female bodies, and of course I think it makes it even more emphatic because these words are at the end of each line. And then we've got the oxymoron merry misery, which I guess highlights his the conflicting feelings he has of both attraction to these women and repulsion towards himself. Really, he feels that he's ill with lust, but he mentions that in the last verse. So moving on to the second verse, he talks about the golden hiking girl with wind about her hair, the tennis playing biking girl, the wholly to my liking girl to see and not to care. So the same technique really in the first verse. You've got the emphasis, the repetition of the word girl, where flesh was, and obviously it's showing that he is highlighting his obsession with these young women. He wants not to be attracted to them, to see and not to care, but he can't help himself. Actually, quite relevant to this is the form of this poem. There's lots of run-on lines. And by run-on lines I mean lines that don't have some kind of punctuation at the end of them. So that speeds up the pace of the poem somewhat, and it's almost as if when you read it you kind of have to quicken the pace towards the last line in each verse, and it seems to imitate or mirror the quickening of his heart rate, and that seems to happen around line 4, where the speed really picks up. You almost run out of breath when you read each verse. Moving on to the third verse, let me just move this up a bit. Moving on to the third verse. At sundown on my tricycle, I tore the borough's edge, and icy as an icicle, see bicycle by bicycle stacked waiting in the hedge. It's unclear really what he means by icy as an icicle. I mean, it's very strange, kind of arbitrary use of the word. I mean, is he cold because the sun's going down? Is it just there for the sake of rhyme because it rhymes with bicycle? It's perhaps another example of Betjeman prioritising sound over sense. You know, the sound of the words and the rhyming is more important than it making sense. So it's the fourth verse that's quite interesting, and it's all based around these spaniels. What do the spaniels represent? Are they real or are they imaginary? Let's have a look. So the bicycles are stacked waiting in the hedge. So we kind of wonder, well, what are these girls doing behind that hedge? There's an implication there that something untoward is happening behind that hedge. And so what he does in this fourth verse is he conjures up these images of these kind of spaniels jumping up and chewing underwear and get down from me, I thunder there, you spaniels, shut your jaws. Your teeth are stuffed with underwear, suspenders torn asunder there, and buttocks in your paws. It's really quite an absurd image, really, of these spaniels jumping up. I mean, spaniels are particularly energetic animals. They're kind of irrepressible. And maybe it's that aspect of these dogs that seems to, for Benjamin, encapsulate his uncontrollable feelings. He'd rather see and not care, but he can't. And perhaps he kind of, he draws a parallel between these spaniels and his own sexual desires. So these dogs, the image of these dogs is linked with his own impure sexual desires. Perhaps he wishes he had their freedom. But anyway, the image somehow kind of represents his lustfulness. And then looking at the last verse, let's move that up. Looking at the last verse, oh, whip the dogs away, my lord, they make me ill with lust. Bend bare knees down to pray, my lord, teach sulky lips to say, my lord, that flaxen hair is dust. So perhaps the sound of the dogs barking kind of jolts him back to reality. But he describes himself as ill with lust. His weakness, he makes it a source of comedy in the poem. And therefore, he comically implores God, he begs God to save him from such sinful thoughts. In a way, it's a typically comic resolution, because he wants to restore some kind of order. Let's have a look at that last couple of lines. Teach sulky lips to say, my lord, that flaxen hair is dust. Flaxen hair is sort of pale yellow hair, I guess blonde hair. That flaxen hair is dust. So there's that kind of dust. The word dust conjures up this the idea about ashes to ashes and dust to dust. He wants to extinguish the flame of his lust and obliterate it to dust. And he needs to. So he implores God to help him. But of course, he's not really taking this very seriously. In this poem, what he's doing is he's mocking himself and his desires. Really, he's mocking, in doing this, he's mocking the behaviour of all old men who still have stirrings of desire. So what comic devices are being used in this poem? Well, I guess the narrator is shockingly honest, and I think that honesty, that shocking honesty, creates the comedy. It's kind of at the root of the comedy, because anything that's shocking, we often respond to it by laughing. And I guess there's the taboo as well of sexual attraction to younger women. And obviously, I guess what he's really doing here is he's exaggerating that he feels rather like an old man in the face of these young women that he describes. So he feels like an old man. So he uses exaggeration for the purpose of comedy.